Hi, I'm Clara. Well, that's not my real name. Let me clarify. If you're reading this, then chances are someone has handed it to you with a note saying, you need to hear her side of the story. Or maybe you stumbled upon it by accident. Either way, here we are. My actual name? It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what happened after 5 years of giving everything I had to a company that never even bothered to acknowledge my existence beyond a paycheck. 5 years. Can you believe that? 5 years of sitting at the same desk, staring at the same gray walls, answering emails faster than anyone else on the team, and still being told during every performance review that there wasn't enough budget for a raise. Not once. Not twice. Every single time. And yet, somehow I stayed. Loyalty, they called it. Stupidity, I should have named it. But before I get ahead of myself, let me rewind just a little. You see, when I first started working at Crestline Solutions, a corporate behemoth known more for its soul-crushing policies than its innovative products, I was fresh out of college. Bright-eyed, eager, full of dreams about climbing the ladder and making an impact. The kind of person who thought hard work would be rewarded because, well, isn't that how life works? Spoiler alert, no, it doesn't. Crestline wasn't exactly welcoming from day one. The office smelled like stale coffee and disappointment, and everyone seemed too busy trying to look busy to actually do anything productive. But I didn't care. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted them to see that hiring me was the best decision they ever made. So I worked late nights. I volunteered for projects no one else wanted. I learned the ins and outs of the company so well that people started coming to me instead of their managers. And sure, there were moments where I felt proud of what I'd accomplished. Small victories, like getting praise from a client or finishing a report early. Those kept me going for a while. Then came the reviews. Year after year, my boss, Greg, a man whose idea of leadership involved taking credit for other people's ideas, would sit me down in his cramped office and tell me how valuable I was to the company, how indispensable, how much potential I had. But then he'd say something like, unfortunately, budgets are tight right now, or we're restructuring priorities, or some other corporate jargon designed to soften the blow of hearing the same thing over and over again. No raise. No promotion. Just stagnation. At first, I believed him. After all, Crestline was growing rapidly, or at least that's what they kept telling us in those quarterly meetings where executives droned on about market share and revenue streams. Surely, I thought, if I just kept pushing, kept proving myself, things would change. But as the months turned into years, reality began to sink in. This wasn't a temporary setback, it was a pattern. A system designed to keep people like me trapped in place while others moved upward. And then there was the culture. Oh, the toxic, suffocating culture. Gossip spread faster than wildfire through the office, fueled by whispered conversations in the break room and passive-aggressive comments in group chats. People hoarded information instead of sharing it, terrified that helping someone else might mean losing their own edge. Managers played favorites, doling out opportunities based on personal connections rather than merit. And don't even get me started on the annual holiday party, where half the staff got drunk and the other half complained about how awkward everything was. Despite all of this, I stuck around. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was pride, or maybe it was just inertia. Whatever the reason, I convinced myself that leaving wasn't an option, not without another job lined up. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Walking away empty-handed would feel like admitting defeat. And I couldn't handle that. So I stayed. Until I didn't. The turning point came last spring. By then, I'd reached my breaking point. Every morning, I dragged myself out of bed and onto the train, dreading the monotony of another day spent staring at spreadsheets and pretending to care about deadlines that only existed to make upper management look good. One evening, after yet another exhausting day, I sat on my couch scrolling through LinkedIn when I saw it. A job posting for a position at a competitor company. A senior role with responsibilities that sounded challenging but exciting. A salary range that made my heart race. For weeks I hesitated. Applying felt like betrayal, even though logically I knew it wasn't. Crestline certainly hadn't shown any loyalty to me. So why should I owe them anything? Still, years of conditioning are hard to shake. Finally, one night, I filled out the application, hit submit, and immediately panicked. Nothing happened right away. Days passed, and I tried to push the whole thing out of my mind. Then, one Friday afternoon, I got the email. They wanted to interview me. Suddenly, the panic returned tenfold. What if Crestline found out? What if Greg caught wind of it and decided to fire me on the spot? Worst-case scenarios flooded my brain, each one worse than the last. But here's the thing about fear. It can either paralyze you or motivate you. In my case, it did both. On one hand, I was terrified of losing everything I'd built over the past 5 years. On the other hand, I realized I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to give. The interviews went better than I expected. Better than I could have hoped, honestly. The hiring manager seemed genuinely interested in my skills and experience, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights into the company's goals. For the first time in ages, I felt valued, not just as a cog in a machine, but as a human being capable of contributing something meaningful. And then, just as I was starting to allow myself to dream about a new future, disaster struck. It started innocently enough. I was in the middle of a meeting when Greg pulled me aside and asked to speak privately. His tone was casual, almost friendly, which immediately set off alarm bells in my head. When we reached his office, he closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "Clara," he began, leaning back in his chair with an expression that was equal parts smug and condescending. "I need to talk to you about something important." My stomach dropped. Somehow I already knew what was coming next. "We've noticed some unusual activity recently," he continued, his voice dripping with faux concern. "Specifically, applications to other companies, competitors to be exact." I froze. How could they possibly know? Had someone seen my LinkedIn profile? Was HR monitoring our accounts? A million questions raced through my mind, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I don't understand," I said slowly, buying time to think. "What does this have to do with my work here?" Greg smirked, clearly enjoying himself. "Well, Clara, we take these kinds of things very seriously. Loyal employees are the backbone of this company, and when someone shows interest elsewhere..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about catching me applying to jobs. This was punishment, retaliation. They weren't firing me because I'd done something wrong. They were firing me because I dared to imagine a life outside of Crestline. "You're letting me go?" I asked, incredulous. "Over an application." "It's not just the application," Greg replied smoothly, pulling a folder from his desk drawer. "We've reviewed your performance, and frankly, it hasn't been up to par. Attendance issues, missed deadlines." Every word felt like a slap in the face. Lies, all of it. Fabricated excuses to justify their cruelty. But arguing wouldn't help. I knew that. So instead, I nodded silently, gathering what little dignity I had left. As Greg handed me the termination letter, I reminded myself of something I'd forgotten during my years at Crestline. I was prepared for this. Months ago, I'd started saving money, updating my resume, and networking quietly. I knew the risks of applying elsewhere, and I'd accepted them. This moment, the moment of reckoning, was inevitable. Walking out of the building for the last time, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, relief, but also determination. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. And if Crestline thought they could crush me, they were dead wrong. The first few days after leaving Crestline were a blur. I spent most of my time alternating between crying on my couch and staring blankly at the walls, replaying everything that had happened in my mind. The betrayal stung more than I cared to admit. It wasn't just about losing a job. It was about losing years of my life, energy, and self-worth to a place that didn't care about me at all. But as the initial shock wore off, something else began to take its place. Clarity. I realized I'd been carrying around this invisible weight for so long. This idea that I owed Crestline something simply because they'd given me a paycheck. But now, sitting in my tiny apartment with nothing but silence surrounding me, I saw how ridiculous that notion was. They hadn't invested in me. I'd invested in them. And they'd repaid me by showing their true colors when it mattered most. That's when I decided. If Crestline wanted to play dirty, I could play too. The first step was taking stock of what I had. Financially, I wasn't in bad shape. Over the past year, I'd quietly squirreled away every bonus and overtime payment into a separate savings account, telling myself it was my escape fund. Now that money became my lifeline. I calculated how long I could survive without a steady income, factoring in rent, utilities, groceries, and other essentials. 6 months, maybe 7 if I cut back on loosies like takeout and streaming services. That gave me some breathing room. Next, I revisited the competitor company where I'd interviewed before things went south. Their offer had been generous, not just in terms of salary, but also benefits and growth opportunities. I emailed the hiring manager who'd spoken with me, explaining that circumstances had changed and I was now available immediately. To my relief, she responded within hours, expressing interest and setting up another round of interviews. This time, I walked into those meetings with a newfound confidence. I knew exactly what I wanted and what I deserved. But while securing a new job was crucial, it wasn't enough. Not for me. No, I needed something bigger. Something that would make Crestline regret ever crossing me. And that's when the idea came to me. You see, during my 5 years at Crestline, I'd learned a lot more than anyone realized. About the company's inner workings, its weaknesses, its secrets. Things I'd never paid much attention to before suddenly seemed glaringly obvious. Like how Greg routinely took credit for projects he hadn't touched, or how upper management consistently prioritized short-term profits over long-term sustainability. Or, most damning of all, how certain clients were treated differently based on favoritism rather than merit. What if I used that knowledge? What if I turned the tables on them? It started small. I reached out to former colleagues, people I trusted, or at least thought I did. Casual conversations over coffee turned into deeper discussions about dissatisfaction with the company culture. Some were hesitant to talk, afraid of retaliation. Others opened up eagerly, venting frustrations they'd kept bottled up for years. Through these chats, I pieced together a broader picture of discontent simmering beneath the surface. One name kept coming up, Rachel. She worked in accounting, a quiet woman who always stayed late and rarely spoke unless spoken to. But according to several sources, Rachel had witnessed shady practices firsthand. Things that could blow the lid off Crestline's carefully curated image. When I finally met her for lunch, she confirmed everything and then some. "They're cooking the books," she whispered, glancing nervously around the restaurant as if someone might overhear us. "Not outright fraud, but close enough. Expenses are padded. Contracts are altered after signing. It's messy." My heart raced. This was gold. If we could expose even a fraction of what Rachel described, it would devastate Crestline. But exposing such information wasn't easy. It required proof, evidence solid enough to withstand scrutiny. And gathering that kind of proof meant risking everything. Still, I couldn't ignore the opportunity. So, together, Rachel and I devised a plan. We agreed to document everything discreetly, collecting emails, memos, and financial records whenever possible. It was slow-going, painstaking work that left both of us constantly looking over our shoulders. One wrong move, and we'd be finished. Meanwhile, I continued preparing for my new role at the competitor company. The interviews went smoothly, and soon I received an official offer letter. Accepting felt surreal, a mix of triumph and vindication. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream again. A better job, a healthier environment, a chance to rebuild. But deep down, I knew the battle wasn't over yet. As the weeks passed, Rachel and I grew bolder. We found allies in unexpected places. Disgruntled employees eager to share their stories. Whistleblowers willing to provide insider details. Each piece of evidence added fuel to the fire burning inside me. By the time I officially started my new position, we had amassed a dossier thick enough to bury Crestline. And then came the moment of truth. I arranged a meeting with my new boss under the guise of discussing industry trends. Once seated in his office, I slid the folder across his desk. He raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "What's this?" he asked, opening it cautiously. "Something you need to see," I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Crestline isn't just a rival company. They're a liability waiting to happen. He flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from skepticism to disbelief to anger. When he finally looked up, his eyes were sharp, calculating. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "That's not important," I said firmly. "What matters is what you do with it." For a long moment, he studied me, weighing his options. Then he nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You've done good work, Clara," he said. "Very good work." Those words sent a shiver down my spine. Good work, yes, but dangerous work. Because now the ball was rolling, and there was no stopping it. Crestline wouldn't know what hit them until it was too late. But as satisfying as revenge felt, I couldn't shake the nagging question lingering in the back of my mind. At what cost? Had I crossed a line I couldn't uncross? Only time would tell. Days turned into weeks, and the fallout began. Whispers spread through the industry about Crestline's questionable practices, prompting investigations and audits. Employees quit en masse, citing toxic environments and unethical leadership. Even clients started pulling out, wary of associating with a tarnished brand. Through it all, I watched silently, biding my time. My new job kept me busy, challenging me in ways Crestline never had. Yet part of me still felt tethered to the chaos I'd unleashed. Guilt gnawed at me occasionally, especially when I thought about the innocent people caught in the crossfire. Was justice worth collateral damage? Then one evening, as I scrolled through news articles detailing Crestline's downfall, I stumbled upon a headline that stopped me cold. CEO steps down amid scandal. Company faces possible bankruptcy. Greg's face stared back at me from the screen, pale and defeated. For a brief second, I felt a pang of pity. But then I remembered the way he'd smirked as he handed me my termination letter. The condescension in his voice. The lies he'd spun to justify firing me. No, I reminded myself. He brought this on himself. Still, the victory felt hollow. Revenge hadn't healed the wounds Crestline had inflicted. It had merely scratched the surface. Moving forward wouldn't be easy, but I vowed to focus on building something meaningful instead of tearing others down. Because sometimes the greatest act of defiance isn't destruction, it's creation. Months later, as Crestline scandals dominated headlines and its once mighty empire crumbled, I found myself standing on the rooftop of my new office building, gazing out at the city skyline. The air was crisp, filled with the hum of life moving forward. My new job had become more than just a career. It was a fresh start, a chance to redefine who I was and what I stood for. I thought about Greg, about the toxic culture I'd left behind, and realized something. They hadn't broken me. If anything, they'd made me stronger, smarter, more determined to carve out a life that wasn't defined by their rules or limitations. Revenge hadn't healed me, but it had taught me an important lesson. Power isn't about tearing others down. It's about lifting yourself up. And that's exactly what I intended to do. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I smiled. For the first time in years, I felt free.